Good morning. We're on the record. Good morning, everyone. As chairperson of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board for the District of Columbia, and in accordance with DC Code Section 25764 of the Open Meetings Act, I am welcoming you to an emergency meeting of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. This meeting has been conducted pursuant to guidance made available by the District of Columbia's Office of Open Government regarding electronic meetings held by public bodies during the public emergency. Pursuant to this guidance, notice of today's meeting was provided 48 hours in advance of the meeting on ABRA's website and on the district's central meeting calendar. The notice included the time, date, agenda, and call-in or login information for public participation. This electronic meeting is being hosted by a WebEx account provided by the District of Columbia government. Please address any questions or complaints to the OOG at opengovoffice@dc.gov. My name is Donovan Anderson, and I'm chairman of the board. I would like to introduce the other members of the ABC board who are also participating electronically pursuant to Mayor's Order 2022-007. Please respond when I announce your name. Mr. James Short.
Mr. James Short, present.
Mr. Bobby Cato.
Bobby Cato, present.
Ms. Rafi Crockett.
Rafi Crockett, present.
Ms. Jenny Henson.
Jenny Hansen, present.
Mr. Edward Grandis.
Edward Grandis, present.
The board has 6 members in attendance for the conduct of business today, and that constitutes a quorum. Our first order of business today, it's a summary suspension hearing, case number 22, CMP 00006, the big board, license number 87398. Ms. Foshman, can you please elevate the rights of the licensee, the licensee's attorney, and the government, please?
Good morning. Please stand by. Katie Chaveri, your rights have been elevated. I do not see Eric Flannery. Walter Adams, your rights have been elevated. And Anthony Cello, your rights have been elevated. That is all, Mr. Chair.
Good morning. Mr. Verley, is your client participating today, ma'am? He's with you. Okay, good morning. All right. All right. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Your Honor, or Mr. Chairman.
There we go. Okay, sorry guys, I was trying to communicate that we were unable to unmute ourselves, but it just worked for the first time. Sorry.
All right, thank you. Okay, good morning. All right. The board today has before it. Let me have the parties introduce themselves for the record. Mr. Adams.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Walter Adams, representing the District of Columbia.
Good morning, Mr. Adams. Do you have co-counsel today?
Yes, I do. We have co-counsel and Mr. Cello. He can introduce himself.
You're on mute, Mr. Cello. We still can't hear you, sir.
Any better, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, we can hear you now. Can you please introduce yourself for the record? Please spell and state your name, please.
And I do apologize. Somehow my speaker settings and microphone setting got switched. Attorney Anthony Cello, Assistant Attorney General, CELO. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board.
Good morning. Good morning. Mr. Chavarelli, can you please spell and state your name for the record, please?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Katie Chaveri, C-H-A-V like Victor, E-R-R-I. I am here on behalf of the licensee, Mr. Eric Flannery, who is also here in my office with me.
Can you please have Mr. Flannery spell and state his name for the record, please?
Eric Flannery, E-R-I-C, F-L-A-N-N, like November, E-R-Y.
Good morning, Mr. Flannery. Good morning. All right. All right, good morning, everyone. All right. The board has before it today a summary suspension hearing involving Dane Flannery Restaurant, trade name The Big Board, a retailer's Class CT located at 421 H Street Northeast. This is case number 21 CMP 00006. On January 26, 2022, the Alcohol Beverage Control Board reviewed investigative report number 22 CMP 00006, which contained allegations that the respondent was in violation of DC regulations and various mayor's orders. As a result of the ongoing non-compliance during the public emergency, the board voted 6-0 on January 26, 2022 to refer the case to the Office of Attorney General for consideration of a summary suspension of the establishment's license. The respondent was initially served notice of this matter by personal service on January 28, 2022 by Supervisor Investigator Mark Brashears, and again by electronic mail service by ABRA employee Danetta Walker. Both forms of service are permitted under 23 DCMR Section 1703. The respondent requested a hearing on February 2nd, 2022 under DC Code Section 25826C. On February 4th, 2022, the respondent filed a continuance motion requesting a 6 weeks continuance for the purpose, amongst other reasons, to retain counsel. The board, through board order number 2022-046, granted in part and denied in part the respondent's continuance motion. The board granted respondent a 1-week continuance. The board further in its order advised the parties that the board, based on the emergency nature of this case, was not inclined to grant any further continuances. Today, the board will be hearing testimony from the Office of the Attorney General, the respondent, and their respective witnesses. The purpose of this hearing is so that the board can determine under DC Code Section 25826 whether the operations of the respondent present an imminent danger to the health and safety of the public. To that end, the board asks that the parties stick to the facts and issues related to the incident. The facts and issues are those contained in the summary action notice dated February 28, 2022, and the investigative report for case number 22 CMP 00006. The board is only interested in hearing about these matters that can be used to establish whether the establishment is an imminent danger to the health and safety of the public. The board will begin this case by hearing the opening statement from the government, represented by Assistant Attorney General Walter Adams and Mr. Anthony Sella, followed by opening statement by Katie Lane Chaveri on behalf of the respondent. But before we begin with opening statements, are there any procedural matters the parties would like to bring to the board's attention? Mr. Adams.
At this time, Mr. Chairman, the district is not aware of any procedural matters. The only thing that we will state is that the district does have intent. We filed an exhibit list where we intend to have at least 5 witnesses testify on our behalf. However, outside of that, there are no other procedural matters.
Thank you. Ms. Chevalier, I'm pronouncing your name against me one more time, so I'll make sure that I get it right moving forward, please.
No, Mr. Anderson, you said it perfectly. It's Cheveri.
Cheveri, thank you.
Yeah, and there's nothing at this time that we're aware of on behalf of the respondent.
All right. The board notes that both parties have filed a number of pre-hearing exhibits and, for the government, a lengthy witness list. As you know, the board is not here to manage your cases, but I do have responsibility to manage the hearing. Are there any subject areas or specific exhibits that the parties can stipulate to that we can simply put into the record and reduce the need for lengthy examination and cross-examination. I know that I'm aware that the government, I've seen the government's exhibits and witnesses. I've also seen your client did put some documents. So Mr. Adams said that he has 5 witnesses. Do you plan to call in witnesses today, ma'am?
The only witness that I would call would be my client to make brief statements in response to any questioning that the government might ask. We do not have an objection to stipulating to the exhibits that I only briefly reviewed. I don't have any reason to object to their admission as far as for today's purposes. So in order to expedite the process, I'd be happy to stipulate to the admission of those exhibits and to any testimony.
All right, so moved.
I don't know if there is any written testimony. I didn't see any affidavits necessarily, but if there are any, we approve of those.
All right. So what are the exhibits that the government wishes to move into evidence?
Mr. Chairman, we have essentially we have 17 exhibits that we listed on the list here. The first 6 of the exhibits relate to what we plan to provide as background testimony regarding the nature of the emergency giving rise to the mayor's orders. So we plan on having an expert witness. So we have the curriculum vitae of Dr. Neil Mangla, who's the chief epidemiologist for the Department of Health. Along with that, he has several graphs. Exhibit 2 is an immune system graph. Exhibit 3 is a vaccination graph. 4 is a graph regarding outbreak information. 5 is regarding the infections, co-infections by age range chart, and also 6 discusses the impact of the face mask, how face masks essentially reduces spread. So the reason that we have these exhibits is to provide for the record information regarding why there is an emergency, the fact, and to establish the emergency. We are providing exhibits 7 through 12 are the relevant case reports completed by the ABRA investigators. Exhibit 13 is an email that was used as part of the investigation for January 22nd, which is a case number 22-CMP-00006, is documentation from the Department of Health. We also are providing a chart regarding what the violations of the mayor's order for across the city as of February 1st. We have information from the Department of Health, as well as for the exhibits 16 and 17, which is information from Big Board, including one being a Facebook post and exhibit 17 being a video based upon the interview done or video created by Mr. Flannery, or created on behalf of Mr. Flannery. So those are the exhibits that we have identified for the board.
So they're admitted without without objection. On behalf of the respondent, there were some submissions. Are there any documents? Or what's the government's positions on the submissions that were done by the respondent?
Mr. Chair, there are certain exhibits that we will allow the admission of without objection, and certain that we will object to. The non-objectionable exhibits are D, E, F, H, and I. We have no objection to those.
I'm sorry. D, E, F, and what? I'm sorry.
H and I.
All right. So D, E, F, H, and I are admitted without objection. And if respondent wishes to call to rely on the other documents, once those are presented, then we will hear arguments, and if there are objections, we'll make a ruling on whether or not those documents should be allowed in the record. All right. So The procedure this morning is that the government will go first. If the government has an opening statement, they'll provide an opening statement. Then we'll have an opening statement from the respondent. Once the government has presented its opening statement and the respondent is going to present its opening statement, then the government will present its case by calling its witnesses. The respondent will have an opportunity to cross-examine the witnesses. Once the respondent has cross-examined the witnesses, board members will have an opportunity to ask questions. Once the board members have asked questions, then I will give the respondent an opportunity to recross the witness, and then the government will have an opportunity to redirect questions off that witness. Once the government has presented its case, then the respondent will present its case. Respondent can elect to make an opening statement at this juncture, or they can make an opening statement once they have presented their case. All right. Mr. Adams, are you still with us? Okay, fine. All right.
I'm still with you.
All right, thank you. One of the beauty of doing this virtually, then if someone disappears from my screen, then I'm going to ask questions to see whether or not they're still there. So you had disappeared from my screen for a moment. All right, so does the government have an opening statement they wish to make?
Yes, we do, Mr. Chairman.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Adams, if yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, and may it please the board. This case is about a bar owner doing exactly what he said he was going to do. Eric Flannery said that the big board wouldn't follow the mayor's order and the board's rulemaking designed to protect the District of Columbia from a deadly pandemic. And the big board has done exactly that. The big board has and continues to refuse to enforce the mask mandate, check for proof of vaccination, or post signs about vaccine and mask rules. Because of that, the big board's operations present imminent danger to the health and safety of the public, and this board should affirm the summary suspension. Today, you'll hear from Dr. Neil Mangla. He's the chief epidemiologist from the Department of Health, about just how dangerous the big board's flouting of the pandemic rules is for the community. He'll describe that right here in DC. COVID-19 has killed nearly 1,300 people, has stretched the hospitals to a breaking point, and has ravaged the city. He'll describe how the big board's actions specifically exacerbate this problem. Bars are among the top 3 leading source of outbreaks for COVID. For adult-centric activities, it is the top source of outbreaks. And the mayor's order that the big board has decided to flout are designed to stop community spread and to help prevent hospitalizations and deaths. You'll also hear from 5 ABRA investigators who can describe exactly what big board is doing. That each time big board refused to enforce the mask mandate, check for proof of vaccination, or post signs about vaccine and mask rules. We're starting with on January 14th of this year. The day before the vaccine requirement took effect, investigator Rhoda Glasgow went to the big board. She went to advise the big board about the rules taking effect, and at that time she saw that the big board's employees were not wearing masks. So she issued a verbal warning for failure to comply with the requirement. At the time that she also tried to educate the owner regarding the mayor's orders, and Mr. Flannery indicated to her that day that the big board would not comply with the vaccine checking requirements. They did exactly what they said that they would do. On January 15th, ABRA investigators Kevin Puente and Vanessa Pleitez went to the big board. No vaccine or mask rule signs. Staff did not wear masks. No one checked for vaccine status of patrons that arrived. This time, investigator Puente told Mr. Flannery about the face mask and vaccine status requirements and provided him copies of the mayor's orders and the required signs about the mask and vaccine status. Mr. Flannery said at that time that he had no face mask for him or his employees to wear, and that, quote, until the mayor changes her mind on the orders, I'm not going to change mine, end quote. Investigator Puente issued Big Board written warning about the face mask and verbal warning about checking for vaccine status and posting signs. On January 18, investigator Mark Ruiz went to the Big Board. Again, no vaccine or mask rule signs. The staff wasn't wearing masks. Nobody was checking for vaccine status of those who went inside. Investigator Ruiz issued a citation about the face mask and written warning about the vaccine status and signs. On January 20th, investigator Christopher Condon went to the Big Board. No vaccine mask rule signs posted. Staff wasn't wearing masks. No check for the vaccine status of those who went inside. On that day, investigators Ruiz and Ann Mitchell then came to the Big Board that night to issue a citation about the vaccine status and the face mask. It continued. January 21st, a Department of Health inspector went to the Big Board. She observed no mask or no mask being worn by staff, and that nobody was checking the vaccine status of those who went inside. And when she asked a server to wear a mask, the employee's response was, it is not required. Then on January 22nd, lastly, investigator Puente returned, went to the Big Board. He observed, again, no vaccine or mask rule signs posted. The staff wasn't wearing masks, that nobody checked for vaccine status of those who went inside. Investigator Puente advised Mr. Flannery that the establishment was in violation of the mayor's orders. Simply stated, members of the board, the establishment flouts the rules. The evidence will show that the Big Board is putting its patrons at risk, its staff at risk, and everyone in the district at risk by deciding they won't follow the rules and won't do its part to limit community spread of the deadly COVID-19 virus. Mr. Flannery said Big Board would not follow the rules, and again, Big Board has shown it wants to do exactly what he said it would do. So as a result, the operations of the Big Board does present imminent danger to the health and safety of the public, and we will show that that is the case. The board should affirm the summary suspension. Thank you.
Thank you. You wish to make an opening statement at this juncture, ma'am?
Just a brief one, sir. My client doesn't contest much of the evidence that will be presented today and that we've seen in the exhibit list. It should be noted, however, that for many, many months, almost 2 years, my client absolutely complied with all of the mask mandate rules that were in place. The day that he discovered that he needed to remove bar stools from his establishment, he did so. He moved tables out. He became a carry-out only facility. He followed all of these rules. And then when the mayor lifted the mask mandate, things changed. The business reopened fully. And then again, the law changed. At this time, my client is simply exercising what he believes to be his rights to permit his business to continue to operate, because without being required to check vaccine cards from everybody who enters the establishment is a burden that should not be placed on the owner of the business. And it's something that impedes his ability to operate. So at this time, my client understands that there's a conflict, but he honestly believes that the law that is currently in place is not actually furthering the public interest and is instead hindering business operations. And that's why his conduct has been what it is. If the mayor were to promulgate a law that accurately and narrowly addresses the issues, certainly he would comply as he did in the past. He's got a clean track record, 10 years of business on H Street, has never been a problem to the community, and just wishes to be able to continue to operate so that he can keep his employees employed and allow them to have food on the table for their families. Thank you.
I think that we're at a space in this case where the government has stated that the respondent has refused to comply with the requirements, and you have basically stated that your client has conceded. And so I'm not sure what is it that this board has been asked now to do, because I'm asking,
Right.
what is it that this board has been asked to do? If the government stated that these are the regulations you haven't complied with, your client says, yes, we have not complied with it, and I'm not hearing that your client is going to say that effective today, I'm going to comply with it. So,
Well, Mr. Anderson, to respond to you, the only thing that I can think of that would be a compromise and a way to meet in the middle here would be, and this is something that I have proposed to counsel for the government, very informally. We were only engaged yesterday, so of course it's been very difficult to prepare for this. But looking at the big picture, what we would request as relief from ABRA would be that ABRA consider entering into an agreement with the respondent to permit him to operate a carryout business. Now, I understand that ABRA only has jurisdiction over the license with respect to alcohol and beverages, but we obviously have to work with the Department of Health and with DCRA as well. But our proposed resolution would be something that allows the business to continue to operate, to permit its employees to be to receive their paychecks, and to permit Mr. Flannery to operate the business in a limited capacity, sort of, understanding that he believes, legally and morally, that he cannot comply with the mayor's order as it currently stands. He can and is willing to comply with the laws that apply to takeout facilities where his employees will be wearing masks. People who come and pick up food would be wearing masks. Very similar to Panera and Dunkin' Donuts and Jimmy John's and all the places that I frequent every day here downtown, where I don't need to show a vaccine card when I walk in. And we're asking for that relief as a compromise while, Mr. Flannery deals with his legal issues in the appropriate forum, which I personally do not believe is before ABRA. I think that that's a bigger question for the United States District Court or another jurisdiction to consider. So that would be the relief that we would request today.
well, one of the things that the board can do, we can go in recess and you and Mr. Adams can have a conversation. And if there's an offer in compromise that the government wishes to bring to the board for the board's consideration, the board will listen to that. So I'll ask Mr. Adams, do you want us to take for us to go in recess for you to speak?
No.
Mr. Adams? Mr. Sello?
Mr. Sello will address that.
Mr. Sello?
No, Mr. Chair. At this time, we have, council is right that we have discussed that as a possibility. However, at this time, no offer in compromise along those terms is possible. We do not have sufficient information, and we do not believe that that relief is appropriate right now, particularly considering that it would be a conditional offer to continue their non-alcohol related business when there are other summary suspensions and shutdowns from other agencies that we have no control over or authority to speak for. As a result, the requested relief is not appropriate or possible for us to consent to at this time, and there is no offer in compromise currently on the table.
And I will add to that, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect to the position that's been stated by the establishment, essentially because of this is an emergency hearing that was requested by Mr. Flannery himself. So the district's intention, and we certainly don't want to take up any more time that's necessary for the board, but we just want to be able to set the record so that the record is established for the board, and so that the board can make a decision on whether to affirm the summer suspension or not. And so we think that in this case, that is really, especially with because it's the first time we're dealing with these emergency rules, that it's really just best for us to go ahead and put on the evidence And then, if anything happens afterwards, that we can raise it to the board at that time.
Well, I just want to make sure that all parties are aware. Our jurisdiction falls over the service of alcohol. So I know that once we issued our summer suspension notice, I believe that was on January 28th, demanding that they no longer serve alcohol. And so whatever decision that we issue today would be whether or not they will be allowed to sell and serve alcohol. The other operation of their business, that's not within ABRA's purview. So this only has to do with whether or not they will be allowed to serve alcohol based on their refusal to comply with our regulations regarding the mask mandate and the vaccine mandate with regard to the sale and service of alcohol. So as long as that's clear, whether or not they can continue selling food or any other service, that's not within ABRA's jurisdiction. And so we could issue a decision today saying you can continue selling alcohol, or no, you can't continue selling alcohol, and that's not going to impact the operation of your business, whether or not you can be open. All that our decision is whether or not you can sell or serve alcohol based on the perceived violation, if it's been proven by the government that you are not complying with the established regulation. So with that said, we'll have a hearing, since it's not apparent that the parties are able to reach any compromise, and we will make a decision. And we'll make a decision once we hear the testimony that's presented by both sides. All right. What I'm going to do, what I will do is that once you call your witness, Mr. Adams, I will ask that person's right be elevated. So who's the first witness you're calling, sir?
Your Honor, Mr. Chairman, it will be Dr. Mangla.
Ms. Foshman, I'm sorry, hold on. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to say, I've already stipulated the admission of testimony, and also it's an uncontested matter at this point. Do we really need to go through with the full substance, or, we would concede that without an agreement from the government, which we still think, I still would propose that a conditional agreement is appropriate, but absent that, I don't know if we need to go through with all of this. Of course, I defer to you, but based on our position, I think that we can just hear the board's ruling, assuming that it would be a denial.
Well, the bond, we haven't heard any testimony, so the board does not have any information. Yes, we did an investigative report, and there's an allegation that certain refusals have occurred, but I don't know that independently, so I'm not quite sure what it is that the board will be making a determination of.
Okay,
if the parties want to provide a proffer of each witness, what the witness is going to testify to, and if to streamline this process, if the parties can agree that Mr. Adams or Mr. Sella, and I can't tell the government how to present its case, but I'm just saying if there's an agreement that the government can provide a proffer of each witness's testimony, and there's an agreement that this is so, and once that proffer is in the record, and then the proffer testimony is in the record, and then we can have closing arguments, and both sides ask the board to make a decision, that could be acceptable, but that's up to the government. I can't tell the government how to present this case.
Understood. Thank you.
I'll say this, Mr. Honor. We appreciate Ms. Chaveri's sentiments. However, we think that it is in the best interest for all parties involved to simply just put it on the record. Again, we'll make this as expeditious as possible. However, we think it's best for us to move forward and ensure that there's a proper record for this.
Okay, that's fine. I'm sorry again. So who's your first witness, Mr. Adams?
Dr. Anil Mangla.
Ms. Foshman, can you please elevate the rights of Dr. Mal? I'm sorry, what's her last name, please?
His name is Mangala.
Ms. Mangler, please.
This has been accomplished.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, before I begin questioning Dr. Mangla,
And Mr. Solo, one of the things I would ask that you do is that please, for the two, so we can have a clear record, just identify yourself before you ask a question, please. All right, so go ahead, Mr. Solo.
how would you like me to handle reference towards exhibits? Should I share my screen, or will we have the administrator pull up the exhibits when we request them?
No, if you have the documents, then I'll allow you to share your screen. And all right, so let's have Dr. Mangler. Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right, your witness, sir.
Dr. Mangla, please state and spell your name for the record.
Yes, it's Anil Mangla, first name A-N-I-L, last name Mangla, M-A-N-G-L-A.
What is your current position?
I am the state epidemiologist for the district.
And can you briefly describe what that position entails?
Yes, so the position entails a few things. Number one is I am the subject matter expert for all infectious diseases. I am also over all the investigations for infections, especially at this time, COVID. I'm also spearheading a team that does all the contact investigation for the district. And finally, I also am part of the team that recommends all the guidances.
And your curriculum vitae has already been entered into evidence, so I'm not going to go over that. But can you briefly just describe the different positions you've held as an epidemiologist in your career?
Absolutely. My career started 20 years ago in public health. I have, prior to the 2 years I've been in DC as the state epidemiologist, as well as the supervisory epidemiologist. Prior to this, I served as the deputy health director for the city of San Antonio, as well as the director of public health and associate professor for the UIW School of Medicine. And then prior to that, I was the director for immunizations and infectious disease for the state of Georgia and the acting state epidemiologist for Georgia. Prior to that, I was the chief epidemiologist for the state of Indiana.
Mr. Chair, at this time, I offer Dr. Mangla as an expert witness.
Mr. Chiarelli, do you have any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, Dr. Mangler has been presented as an expert witness and be it. All right, go ahead.
Dr. Mangla, are you familiar with the board's orders? Are you familiar with the mayor's orders concerning bars and restaurants in the District of Columbia?
Yes.
And can you please explain to the board what is the purpose of the orders surrounding COVID-19 and the vaccinations?
Yes, the orders are that there is a mandate for individuals to be showing their vaccination cards and people to be vaccinated when entering these facilities.
And well, let's start with the mask order. Why is the mask order relevant and important in the time of COVID?
Yes, so a mask order is crucial in the layered mitigation of COVID within the district as well as nationally. The COVID-19 virus, which is a variant of the Omicron, is very infectious. It is an airborne disease. That means it is spread by breathing, by coughing, by sneezing, by talking, by eating. And so it is very clear that when you wear a mask, you're actually protecting any of these minute particles that are coming out of your mouth. And so these particles are airborne. If there's another person on the other side, they could be exposed. And because of the contagiousness, individuals get infected much quicker than the previous strains that we have seen in DC or nationally.
At this time, Mr. Chair, I request permission to share my screen.
Ms. Foshman, can you please allow Mr. Seller the opportunity to share screen?
This has been accomplished.
Thank you.
Dr. Mangla, I am sharing with you what has been marked and entered into evidence as Government's Exhibit 3. Please let me know if you can see this.
Yes, I can.
Can you please identify what this exhibit is?
Yes, this is an exhibit kind of showing the importance of individuals that are vaccinated as well as boosted.
And can you please describe what each column here shows?
Absolutely. So the first column, that is a column on the far left, is when an individual is fully vaccinated with a booster, they are 10 times less likely to get infected compared to an individual that is unvaccinated. The middle column actually reiterates the importance of a booster. So if anybody that is fully vaccinated with a booster is 2.5 times less likely to get infected compared to someone who's fully vaccinated, which means their initial two doses that they got. And then, of course, 4 times less likely to die, which is really important because we are seeing an increase in the death rate. And then the third one is actually really focusing on if you're fully vaccinated and boosted, you are 20 times less likely to die compared to anybody that is unvaccinated.
I'm moving down to page 2 of this exhibit, and this shows a chart. Can you please explain what this chart is and what it shows?
Yes, so this chart actually is showing the local data on individuals that have been fully vaccinated compared to individuals that have not been vaccinated. And this is actually assisting us in how the cases of unvaccinated occurs compared to individuals that are vaccinated and boosted. The graph clearly shows that if you are boosted and if you are vaccinated, your likelihood of getting infected is significantly, orders are significantly less than individuals that are not vaccinated.
When did the Omicron surge begin?
Omicron, my apologies. The Omicron surge began just after Thanksgiving. As a matter of fact, internationally, it started the Thanksgiving weekend.
So I don't know if you can see my mouse here, but this spike on the right hand starting right around November 28th, would that correlate to the Omicron surge?
Yes.
And so in the time of Omicron, are vaccines even more important for helping to reduce the spread?
Yes, vaccines are very important to avoid spread for two reasons. Number one, the vaccine does two things. Number one is the vaccines help protect an individual from being infected. And number two, vaccines actually help an individual who is infected from transferring the virus to others in a very less manner compared to people that are unvaccinated.
I'm scrolling down to what is page 3 of this exhibit. Can you please explain this chart to the board?
Yes, this is local data kind of showing individuals that are vaccinated and boosted have a much less likelihood being hospitalized compared to individuals that have not been vaccinated.
And this chart shows a red line that is hovering near zero as fully vaccinated. Does that refer to fully vaccinated but not boosted?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And again, on this chart, it starts at November 29th, but would that be the Omicron spike?
Absolutely.
And does this spike in hospitalization put a strain on the district? And can you please explain what strain, if any?
Oh, absolutely. We actually had a significant strain, and that was, as a matter of fact, Christmas weekend, where my staff worked significantly, and I'll tell you why. We actually had to provide a new guidance for the city or for the district regarding individuals, all healthcare workers that actually were getting infected and were being isolated and quarantined, and we had to approach CDC to change some of the guidelines to allow individuals to work because there was a significant shortage of staff members, and that was a very huge concern with the infrastructure of hospitals and staff operating within the district.
I'm turning to what has been marked and admitted as Government Exhibit 4. Are you familiar with this chart?
Yes.
Can you please explain it?
Yes, this is a chart that one of my teams, which is the data team, provides the district on a weekly basis. We update this on every Monday of the week. This chart actually identifies the number, not cases, but the number of outbreaks that occur within the district. And as you can see, we have stratified that by different locations.
Looking at specifics here, bars and restaurants have had 58 outbreaks during this pandemic, correct?
Yes.
And as far as I can see, that is the third leading cause of outbreaks behind K through 12 school and daycare. Is that correct?
I just want to kind of make it clear that it's not throughout the entire pandemic. There's a very clear, distinct timeline. And if you look at the timeline, this is between July 30th, 2021 to February 2022. So that numbers is that timeline. If it's the entire pandemic, it will be higher than that.
Thank you for clarifying. So the two leading causes, schools, K through 12, and daycare, childcare, are primarily child-focused activities, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And if we look at the spike in outbreaks as it relates to bars and restaurants, I see here that there were 24 outbreaks the week of December 10th. Is that correct?
Yes.
The mayor's order reimposing the mask mandate for bars and restaurants was December 18th, was it not?
Yes.
So as I read this graph, there were 24 outbreaks the week before the mask mandate went into effect, and 3 outbreaks the week that the mask mandate went into effect.
Correct. Correct.
And since that time, we have only seen 2 outbreaks stemming from bars and restaurants.
Yes, correct.
Now, in terms of adult-centric activities, can we infer from these numbers that bars and restaurants are the leading source of outbreaks for adult-centric activities?
Yes.
And is there any overall conclusion regarding the source of outbreaks that you can draw?
Yes, overall conclusion in the outbreaks is very clear. These outbreaks occur where people gather, where they unmask. Vaccination plays a very vital role, and that's because this is airborne. Because of Omicron specifically being a strain or a variant that has a smaller or shorter incubation period, as well as, even more important, it is more transmissible. If you're in an enclosure where there's not much ventilation, where there's large amount of people, where there's crowds, where there's talking, eating, laughing, there is a very high possibility of people getting infected.
Turning to what has been marked and admitted as Government Exhibit 5, can you please explain this table?
Yes, this table actually provides an analysis stratified by the number of cases that we have received in DC by age groups.
And looking at the table on the left, if we look at the percent column for age groups 20 through 44, by my math, that's about 52% of all cases.
Correct.
Would you agree that that age group, 20 to 44, is the most likely to frequent bars in the district?
I would assume that, yes.
Okay. Looking at Government Exhibit 6, this is another table. Can you please briefly explain this table to the board?
Yes, this table was a publication that was peer reviewed and released a week ago. It clearly identifies the importance and the success of individuals wearing masks. As you can see from the data, the control was where the reference, or the control as we call it, is line 1. That means that was individuals that were unmasked. And then you go down, they have 3 different types of masks. You have a cloth mask, you have a surgical mask, and then you have an N95. It is very clear if you wear a mask. Let's start by a cloth mask. You are 56% less likely to get infected. If you wear a surgical mask, you are actually 66% less likely to get infected. And if you wear N95, it is very clear that you are 83% less likely to get infected.
And looking at page 2 of this exhibit, this is a different table, but can you please describe the importance of this table and what that means to the board?
Yes, so this table kind of, again, is related to the use of masks, but is related to how often you use the mask. And as you can see, it's very clear. If you wear a mask all the time, you are less likely to, you are 66, so you are actually 54% less likely to get infected. And if you wear it most of the time, you are 45% less likely to get infected. So again, very clearly signifying the importance of masks.
And because I'm not a scientist or a statistician, could you please just briefly explain on the right of both of these tables, we have an odds ratio, adjusted and unadjusted p-values. Can you just explain what those are and what those mean for our understanding?
Yes, so an odds ratio is the odds of someone getting infected. So it is, you interpret it as 2. If the number is 1, that means it's stationary. There is no, there is not an individual that is a certain fold at risk or protective, right? So if the number is higher than 1, say 2, that means the likelihood of someone being infected is 2 times higher. If it's a number that's less than 1, then it means it's protective. The way we look at this is it's 1 minus the odds ratio to give you a percentage. So for example, if you had, I'm looking at the last one, all the time, it's 0.44. So that's your odds ratio. It's protective. So 1 minus 0.44 gives you 0.56, which is 56%. The more important number is a p-value. A p-value actually signifies the significance. Significance means there is a clear comparison between the control group and the group that wore masks. And any number that is 0.05 or less means it is very significant. So if you look at the last one, most of the time and all the time, those numbers are 0.07, 0.01. That means these are very significant when we're looking at odds ratios and when we're looking at the use of these, in this particular case, masks.
All right. Now, Dr. Mengele, I would next like to show you one of petitioner's exhibits, which has been admitted into evidence, Exhibit E. And I'm showing that on my screen. Are you familiar at all with this exhibit? And I can scroll out if you need to see the larger context.
Yes, I see it very clearly.
Now, this exhibit purports to be the daily case rate for the District of Columbia. Does that part appear accurate to you?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And right around this November time that we've seen in the other charts, we do see a very large Omicron spike, correct?
Yes.
Now, cases seem to have been falling since late January, but right now the daily case rate, according to this, is 31.1 per 100,000.
Correct.
Is that still above the substantial community spread line?
Yes, absolutely. So again, everything is relative. So relative to where we were with the peak in the pandemic, we're doing a phenomenal job where we are. However, if you look at those colored lines, where we should be is something known as minimum community spread. And the minimum community spread is 5 cases or less. We're nowhere near 5 cases. If you look at the number, as you said, is 33, which is 7-fold higher than where we should be. And so even if you look at that 33, that's where we were last year, December. And last year, December, that was significant. So yes, it may look like we decreasing and we are moving in the right direction, but we're nowhere near where we should be, which is less than 5 cases per 100,000.
And talking specifically about last year in December, the numbers are not precise on this chart, but it does appear that we are right around the same peaks as we saw at the height of the third, second, and first waves of the COVID pandemic. Is that an accurate interpretation?
Correct.
So even though we're far less than the worst of Omicron, are we still roughly as bad as the worst we saw of the pandemic in the last 2 years?
I agree, yes.
Okay. I'm going to stop sharing my exhibits at this time, Mr. Chair. And Dr. Mengele, looking at all of this data, and I realize that it was a lot we got through very quickly, but can you tell the board where are we in the pandemic and what, if any, need is there for masks and vaccine mandates?
We're nowhere near where we should be, as the graph has clearly illustrated. We're still 7-fold higher than where we should be to get any of these mandates removed. That's number one. Number two, again, to err on the safer side, just because of what happened last year and because of this variant being unpredictable, masks should continue because we know mask is safe. Even more important, the best prevention for this type of a virus is clearly get vaccinated. Vaccinations have shown to increase the amount of antibodies. These antibodies do 2 things again. It's going to help individuals who are exposed to avoid them getting infected. That's number one. And number two is the spread that we talk about. Even if an individual is infected, their spread to others is also going to decrease because of vaccinations. Unvaccinated individuals, 2 things are going to occur. They're going to get infected, number one, that causes a burden to the state. Number two is they're going to be actually transmitting this to others, and we may cause another explosion of numerous cases regarding the pandemic. So again, the mask and the vaccine mandates are of crucial essence to continue with the trend we've seen right now.
And if a bar or restaurant were to not follow the mask rule or the vaccine check rule, would that pose an imminent threat of harm to the community?
So from science and from data-driven evidence that we have seen, I will agree absolutely yes. And the reason behind it is, again, as we saw, the number of outbreaks in restaurants and bars have been increasing over the past few weeks here in the district. Number two is it's clear that this is airborne, and if you are in an enclosed area without a mask, not vaccinated, you are at very high risk of getting the disease, and number two, spreading the disease.
And Dr. Mengele, are there any other considerations concerning the mayor's orders that we have not discussed, which you believe the board should be aware of?
No, we've discussed all. I also just want to make it very clear that we are not in the clear zone, as you have seen that the death rate nationally still continues to go up. And so this is a concern. People don't look at that, but we are seeing almost 2,000 deaths per day nationally.
And Dr. Mengele, were all of your expert opinions today offered to a reasonable degree of scientific and medical certainty?
Yes.
No further questions at this time.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for the witness?
Yes, Mr. Anderson. So my first of all, Good afternoon, Dr. Mangla. It's hard to see whether, I guess he doesn't get called out. So I have a few questions. With respect to the government exhibit 4, that exhibit refers to an outbreak. Can you describe for us the definition of an outbreak?
Yes, an outbreak is two or more cases that are epidemiology linked in a certain area. So again, an outbreak could be not a case, but an outbreak could be linked, meaning there was a very clear link within that facility where one person was actually infected and exposed and infected others. And I say others because the link could not just have been one person, but it could be secondary transmission to more than one within that area. So when we say one, when we look at one outbreak, it may be one outbreak, but they may be 10 people associated with just that one outbreak.
Okay, and thank you for that. What would be, if I were to identify somebody who was COVID positive, who was in the same family as somebody else who had traveled to a restaurant, would the two of their cases be considered an outbreak?
That's a really good question. No. Our definition of outbreak on our dashboard makes it very clear that these outbreaks are outbreaks within areas and they are not related to family or household contacts.
Thank you. You mentioned that restaurants and bars are considered the largest source of outbreaks or infection among adults. Is that right?
From the data and from the outbreaks with that age group, correct.
And have you reviewed any specific data with respect to bars and restaurants within the District of Columbia when reaching that conclusion?
Well, I mean, this is very clear when we are looking at our data analysis. We actually make a very robust data set to actually provide us with this type of information. So this information is completed by a robust team of data analysts as well as epidemiologists to make these type of conclusions.
So have you reviewed records and data from specific restaurants within the District of Columbia?
What we do is every case that comes in is thoroughly investigated, and we then conclude on the data we collect from individuals that were infected. That means our cases, and then we also interview all the contacts that case was in touch with.
And do you know how many restaurants or bars within the District of Columbia have had outbreaks?
I don't disclose that. It's just we use aggregate data.
You use aggregate data?
Well, I mean, I have the numbers. I just can't tell you which bars or what, where we, I mean, we get that information. I can share it because of privacy.
But can you tell me how many bars and restaurants in the District of Columbia have had an outbreak?
I don't have that information on hand, but I can provide it to my attorney.
Thank you. I have no further questions for this witness. Thank you very much, Dr. Mangla.
Thank you. Any questions by any board members? All right, hearing none. Do you, Mr. Feller, do you have any redirect?
No redirect, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Dr. Mangler, thank you very much for your testimony today. Have a great day, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, do you have another witness?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Our next witness is Rhoda Glasgow. I will state that we will provide testimony for her. She did not have an investigative report. And then afterwards, after her testimony, Mr. Chairman, I think the government will discuss our ability to be able to make proffers, or at least to ensure what's being covered by the stipulations by the big board, and with that said, then we might be able to make proffers from that point.
All right, fine. Ms. Foxbaum, can you please elevate the rights of Ms. Glasgow?
This has been accomplished. Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Glasgow. Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Your witness, sir.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chairman. Ms. Glasgow, can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Rhoda Glasgow, RHODA, Glasgow, GLASGOW.
And Ms. Glasgow, you're an investigator for the Alcoholic Beverage Regulation Administration, correct?
Yes, I am.
And how long have you been in that position?
Approximately 3 years.
As part of being an investigator, have you conducted investigations related to the, first of all, are you familiar with the mayor's rules and orders regarding the current COVID emergency?
Yes, I am.
And how did you become familiar with that, with those?
With the mayor's order 2021-47, that's staff and employees must be wearing masks, patrons must enter the establishment wearing masks, and mayor's order 2021-148 says that you have to provide your vaccine before you enter an establishment, your vaccine card before you enter an establishment.
And did you, during your time as investigator, you provided checks for various establishments for compliance with those requirements?
Yes.
So turning to January 14th of 2022, were you on duty?
Yes.
And what was your assignment in general on January 14th?
My assignment on January 14th, we were assigned to go to establishments to educate them on the mayor's orders that were going into effect on the 15th. And on that day, I visited the big board.
And which requirement was going into effect on the 15th?
The mayor's order 2021-148, which requires establishment to ask patrons for their vaccine card along with their ID.
And you checked several establishments that day for their compliance?
Yes, I checked a couple, like over 3 establishments I got to that night.
Did you have occasion to come to the big board?
Yes.
And what happened when you were at the big board?
So I entered the establishment and I saw the staff were not wearing masks. I proceeded to the bar area and I asked the bartender for the ABC manager or owner, and he directed me to the owner. I went to the owner, Mr. Flannery, and I identified myself as an ABRA investigator, and I advised him that we are aware that he has been posting that he would not be complying with the mayor's order. And I'm just here to let him know that, I gave him all the details of the mayor's order that was going into effect. I asked him if he was going to comply with it. I asked him if he was familiar with it. He says, yes, he is familiar with the mayor's order. I asked him if he was going to comply with it. He responded, shaking his head, no. And I told him, well, his staff needs to be wearing masks today because that order went into effect on December 20th. And he said, you came here, you gave me my verbal warning. So now in a gesture, he was like, you can go now.
And what happened at that point?
Well, I completed my regulatory inspection. He signed it and I exited the establishment.
And very quickly, so your purpose in going to the establishments was in part to educate the establishments regarding the requirements and to ensure that they'll be able to comply?
Yes.
Very quickly, course indulgence.
I'm sorry?
I just
There's
said
no
course
question.
indulgence. No question.
There's no question. There's no question.
I would like to share screen, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Foshman, can you please allow Mr. Adams to share his screen?
This has been accomplished.
All right. And I just want to make sure, are you able to, Ms. Glasgow, are you able to see my screen at this point?
Yes.
Now I'm showing to you what has already been admitted as the district's Exhibit 14. And what is this? What's this exhibit that appears to be a chart?
Yes, it's a chart of establishments that were in violations of the mayor's order. This is like a running spreadsheet, so we are aware of the steps we need to take because it's a tier step of violation. So if, like for instance, a big board is, which is on line 11, their first charge that day was staff not wearing masks. So the next, we would know for the next investigator when they go there, the next tier of violation would be a written warning.
And just to be clear, you state that you point to line 11. Does line 11 reflects the visit that you made on January 14th?
Yes.
And it reflects a violation, which was the staff not wearing masks?
That is correct.
And this chart is created for all establishments in the district as of February 1st of 2022?
Yes.
I'm going to stop sharing screen. I have no further questions for Ms. Glasgow.
Ms. Chiveri, any questions for Ms. Glasgow?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Any questions by the board members?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have one.
Go ahead, Mr. Short.
Good morning, still Investigator Glasgow.
Morning.
Thank you for your report. Looking again at Exhibit 14, which we just saw on the screen, you said you went there on the 14th of January and that you were there to educate and also to let them know that the mayor's order was in place and that the following day on the 15th, it would be even a little more stringent. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you addressed the owner at that time, who is Mr. Flannery.
Yes.
And you addressed him as an agent of the city working for Arbor as an investigator.
Yes.
And again, what was his response to you?
I asked him if he knew about the mayor's order. He said yes. I asked him if he was going to comply with the mayor's order. He stared at me in my face dead for like 5 seconds. Then he shook his head and he said, look, you came here, you gave me my verbal warning. Now you can, in a gesture that you can leave.
To your knowledge, was that the very first Arbor warning he received? To your knowledge?
Yes.
Okay, I do thank you. Thank you for your testimony. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Any other questions by any board members? All right, Ms. Chiveri, do you have any questions off the witness based on the question that was asked by Mr. Short?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Mr. Adams, do you have any redirect?
No, Your Honor. No, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Ms. Glasgow, thank you very much for your testimony. All right, thank you very much. Mr. Adams, do you have another witness?
Before we call any other witnesses, we wanted to revisit the statements that were made by Ms. Chiveri. First of all, the district wants to understand the nature of what's being stated. So our question at this point would be whether the establishment stipulates the facts stated in the other exhibits, essentially the other investigative reports, which would be, and I briefly board's indulgence just to make sure that I have that list. That would be exhibits 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, as well as exhibits 13 and 15.
That's for you, ma'am. Do you stipulate? So so you're talking about the case reports, and just Darren, what are the case reports, Mr. Adams?
Okay. Sure, I can go through that individually. So And I apologize, I have too many documents going on at the same time.
I think I'm generally aware of the ones you're referring to, and if they are just duplicates of the report of the investigator, I'd stipulate to that. It's no problem.
And I do want to make, it should be good for us to at least read into the record. All right, so for the record, Mr. Chairman, the exhibit specifically is for Exhibit 7, which is Government Exhibit number 7, which is a case report for case number 22-CIT-0008. This is dated January 15, 2022, and is drafted by investigator Kevin Puente, and records the events and the events that occurred on January 15, where both he and investigator Pleites was at the establishment. Includes photographs taken by investigator Pleites of both the a bartender and a photograph of Mr. Flannery being handed the actual signs that were to be posted at the establishment, as well as copies of the mayor's order. So it also includes the regulatory inspection form and the citation that was the written citation that was issued by the investigators on that date. So that is the government's exhibit number 8. Government exhibit number 7. I apologize. Government number exhibit number 7. Government exhibit number 8 is for case report. Is a case report for case number 22-CIT-0010. This is for January 18th of 2022. This was provided by investigator Ruiz, who made observations at the establishment regarding compliance at that time. He provided this specific report is regarding the citation number 4215, which was for an amount of, I apologize, I just want to make sure that I had the right, yes. And the amount of, that was a citation for $1,000 for staff not wearing masks. And it also includes a photograph of unmasked patrons and a staff member, as well as Mr. Flannery. And it also includes the citation for 215 itself. Exhibit 9, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, is for case number or investigation number 22-CIT-0011, again by investigator Ruiz for January 18th. It's a separate investigative report for the same visit. However, this documents the citation that was issued, which was a written warning for the failure to check the vaccinations. And it includes facts regarding that visit, as well as the citation itself. Exhibit 10 is a case report for case number 22-CIT-0013. This is the date for this is January 20th, 2022 for a visit conducted by investigator Condon. We will note that it states within the report that it occurred on January 18th, which is an error, which will be explained by the next exhibit. It also has a copy of receipt as well as citation issued, which was on 4217, which leads us to the next exhibit, which was the updated version of the very same of exhibit 10 for case number 22-CIT-000113, which updates the fact that the report was for observations made on January 20th. We also, as a part of this, will be Exhibit 12, which is for case number 22-CMP-00006 for the date is for January 22nd, which was the last visit by ABRA, which was conducted by Investigator Puente, which includes facts. It also includes a regulatory inspection form, as well as which would be the second exhibit of exhibit 12, which is a food and establishment inspection form completed by the Department of Health that was dated from January 21st that mentions that the establishment was out of compliance. It is important to note that within this was noted within his report that Investigator Puente incorporated the investigation done by the Department of Health on January 21st. And the corollary to that is exhibit number 13, which has already been admitted, which is an email that was provided by the DOH, Department of Health investigator Ilda Bengay, which states her observations from her visit on January 21st that Investigator Puente included his consideration when he created the case report that's stated in Exhibit 12. So those are some of the exhibits. The other exhibit, there's another exhibit, Exhibit 15, and I'll allow my co-counsel, Mr. Cello, to proffer the information for Government Exhibit 15.
Mr. Chair, Exhibit 15 is a series of Department of Health records which were incorporated into Investigator Puente's investigation by reference. These refer to 3 separate DOH investigations occurring on January 19th, January 21st, and February 1st of 2022, all 3 of which identified violations for not having employees wear masks, not checking vaccination status of patrons, and not having patrons wear masks when they were not eating or drinking, and ultimately resulted in a summary suspension from the Department of Health, Food and Safety Division issued at approximately 6 p.m. on February 1st, 2022.
And Mr. Chairperson, if the respondent stipulates to those facts, we proffer those are facts that would be testified to by our witnesses.
Hi, in response to that, we're okay with Exhibit 15 and stipulating to those facts. We would like to make a note for the record that with respect to Exhibit 12, there is a statement on the page Bates marked 56 that Mr. Flannery stated that he, in quotes, he is here to violate me for not following the mayor's order, end quote. Mr. Flannery just wants to note for the record that he, in fact, did not say that. He thinks that that's a misstatement. So, we don't object to the admission, but just wanted to note that we do object to the content of that particular statement.
Mr. Adams.
Mr. Chairman, if anything else, Mr. Chairman, we can just have Investigator Puente. We're fine with the rest of the stipulations that are made. Since there is dispute regarding that quotation, we can provide direct examination by Investigator Puente on that mere statement.
Thank you.
All right. So where are we then? We can admit those. We can admit those exhibits without and there's a stipulation that the parties have agreed to the contents of all the exhibits, with the exception of the statement that was attributed to Mr. Flannery. I'm not quite sure if we necessarily need direct testimony on that, because we'll take the statement for what it's worth. I'm not sure at the end of the day if that's that important, and as a fact that we need to call a witness just for that factual statement, since the rest of the report has not been disputed. So if the respondent has stipulated to that, then there is really no need for us to have any witnesses testify to the contents of these reports.
Understood, Mr. Chairman. I believe that we agree with the chair's recommendation. We do not believe that's the material statement.
So where then are we then, Mr. Adams?
With the stipulations to both the emission of the exhibits as well as the contents of the exhibits, we believe the government can rest this case.
I'm sorry, I did not hear what you said, Mr. Adams. The last thing, I didn't hear what you said. You trailed off.
Oh, I apologize. I agree. I just trail off. Thank you. The district can rest this case with since we have a stipulation to the contents of the admitted exhibits.
All right, thank you. All right, Ms. Sherwood, we can take a 10-minute break, or we can. I mean, we've been going since 10 o'clock. Normally, I would take a break after 2 hours, but we could take a 15-minute break before you present your case, or we can go straight ahead. So it's your call.
We would like to take a 10-minute break just to use the restroom and whatnot.
All right, so we're off the record for 10 minutes. I will say it's 11:30. We will be back on the record at 11:40. So please turn off your microphone, mute your telephone, your lines on your camera, because we do not want to hear conversations that should not be shared. All right?
Thank you.
We'll be back on the record at 11:40. Thank you. Are we back on the record?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Do you have a witness you wish to call, ma'am?
Chairperson Anderson, we've decided that we are not going to present any further or affirmative evidence in the matter, and that the respondent rests.
All right. All right. Mr. Adams, do you wish to make a closing statement? And what I'm asking in the closing statements and I'm not sure if Mr. Adams, you're ready for a closing statement. So if you need a further break for both parties to prepare for closing arguments, I'll accommodate that. So are you ready to make a closing argument, or do we need another break?
Well, Mr. Sella, I think it's ready to make.
I'm not sure who's making that. All right, so if the parties are ready to make a closing statement, that's fine. All right, so what I'm asking the parties to do, what I'm asking the government specifically, what is it that the government is asking the board to do? And for the respondent, I'm asking specifically, what is it that is being requested from the board? And I just want to get some clarification. I know that the proffer that at least the stipulation that the respondent was asking, I think was asking something about a carry out and delivery. And just generally, I don't know whether or not this licensee has such an endorsement on their license. So the board itself couldn't order a carry out and delivery endorsement unless such a request has been made by from the licensee to the agency, and then we would go through that process to see whether or not such an endorsement can be issued. But I'm just saying, generally, it's this: the board just doesn't say one can do carry out and delivery. That there has to be a process that the licensee would have to follow independently by requesting, and then the agency would make a determination whether or not such an endorsement can be issued for that type of license generally. Okay, so I just want to clarify generally how such an endorsement would come about. All right. So, Mr. Sella, you do have an opening statement. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr.
I'm sorry, closing. I apologize. Closing.
And before I present my close, I do ask to reserve time for rebuttal close if necessary.
That's fine.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the board, may it please the board. This is a case in which the facts are not in dispute, in which the law is clear, in which the evidence is uncontested. Mr. Flannery and Big Board made a public statement that they were not going to follow the rules that the mayor laid out, and they proceeded to not follow those rules. There has not been testimony, but you will see in the evidence and in the proffers that there were a total of 8 different investigations, all of which found violations consistent throughout. Every time an investigation occurred, there were no sign of masks being worn by the employees. There was no check of vaccination at the door. There was no sign of masks being worn by patrons who were not engaged in eating or drinking. There is no dispute that these violations occurred, nor is there any dispute in the harm that this could cause the district. Dr. Mangla testified before you in great detail about exactly how hard COVID has hit the district and exactly why the mayor's orders are in place. Bars and restaurants constitute the 3rd leading source of outbreaks in the District of Columbia, and they constitute the leading source of outbreaks for adult-centric activity. Once you get outside of school and daycare, bars and restaurants are how this disease spreads. Now, we looked in depth at Government Exhibit 4, and if you examine that and look in the time frame of the relevant context, we had a major spike in outbreaks in bars and restaurants the week of December 10th. 24 outbreaks that week. The mayor imposed the mask mandate order on December 18th. The week he imposed it, there were 3 outbreaks in bars and restaurants. Since then, there have been 2. These rules are in place for a reason, and they work. We saw through Exhibit 3 the effect that vaccination has on transmission, hospitalization, and death due to COVID. We saw that the vaccination check is necessary to help protect the community from imminent harm and to help prevent the spread of COVID-19 in bars and restaurants. The purpose of these rules is not in dispute. The facts of this case are not in dispute. I do not know exactly what Big Board is seeking from this board, but I can tell you that the appropriate outcome of this hearing is an indefinite summary suspension. Their continued operation places the community at risk and cannot be allowed by this board. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. I close it.
In closing, we're simply going to say, and good afternoon to the board again, that Mr. Flannery and the licensee believe that the regulations around the vaccine card are simply unfounded, that there is no reason for checking vaccine status. We understand the mask mandate. However, we believe that this is just going too far and too intrusive into the business's operations. And for that reason, Mr. Flannery and the licensee respectfully request, as we stated earlier, a modified license or modified grant of rights that would permit the restaurant to operate in a carry-out basis with the understanding that masks would be used and that patrons that come in would be wearing masks to pick up the food or the alcohol, depending on, obviously, the Department of Health's input into this. So again, our position is simply, as stated by by ABRA, we understand we're not contesting the facts at issue here. My client understands precisely what is happening, and his number one goal is to preserve the value of his operation, one that's been in Northeast DC for the last 10 years, and to continue to serve the public in what has, in track history, been a safe manner. And that's all we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fuller, you said you'd reserve the right for rebuttal. Do you wish to make any rebuttal arguments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I do. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, there were 2 arguments made in that close. Number 1, that the regulations are unfounded. The science in this case is clear. Dr. Mengele's testimony was clear and convincing. The regulations exist for good reason. The second argument they raised is that it is too obtrusive or too intrusive into the business operations, that they go too far, that they're too much of a burden to check vaccination on the patrons. Now, I did not have a chance to ask Mr. Flannery about this, but if you look at the photographs, which are admitted into the record, this is a small bar. It has a small footprint. There is a bar with seating at the bar, a single lane walkway, and then seating at the windows. There is no separate seating area. There is no separate restaurant in this facility. That means that Mr. Flannery has a legal obligation to check ID for everyone who enters his establishment. I ask you, how can it be that it is too intrusive to check vaccination cards for every patron when he already checks every ID? There is no basis for the claim of intrusiveness. There is no basis for the claim that the regulations are unfounded. There is only one outcome that makes sense before this board, and I renew my request for an indefinite summary suspension of Big Board. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, the record is now closed. The board has up to 3 days to issue a decision, and we will issue our decision within 3 days. All right, I want to thank both parties for their presentation today. Yeah, I just want to thank both parties for their presentation today. All right. So, as chairperson of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board for the District of Columbia, in accordance with DC Code Section 2574B of the Open Meetings Act, I move that the ABC Board hold a closed meeting for the purpose of seeking legal advice from our counsel on case number. Give me 1 minute, please. On case number 22 CMP 00006, the Big Board. Pursuant to DC Official Code Section 2574B4 of the Open Meetings Act, and deliberating upon case number 22 CMP 00006, the Big Board, for the reasons cited in DC Official Code Section 2574B13 of the Open Meetings Act. Is there a second?
Mr. Short, I second.
Mr. Short has seconded the motion. I will now take a roll call vote on the motion that has been properly seconded. Mr. Short.
Mr. Short, I agree.
Mr. Cato.
Bobby Cato, I agree.
Ms. Crockett.
Rafi Crockett, I agree.
Henson.
Jenny Hansen, I agree.
Mr. Grandis.
Edward Grandis, I agree.
And Mr. Anderson, I agree. As it appears that the motion has passed 6-0, I hereby give notice that the ABC Board will recess these proceedings to hold a closed meeting in the ABC Board conference room pursuant to Section 2574B of the Open Meetings Act. Thank you very much. This case is adjourned. Have a great day. And I'll now ask all board members to return to executive session for further development. Have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.